Champion Chocolatier for Better or Worse, Book 3, a Chapter 1 read-aloud video with the author, Amanda Zieba, the Word Nerd.
Hi, my name's Amanda Zieba. Welcome to my channel, Learning with the Word Nerd. Most of the time on my channel, I'm telling you about other people's books, but sometimes I like to tell you a little bit about my own, and that's what I'm going to do here today. I'm here to talk to you all about the third book in the Champion Chocolatier series, For Better or Worse. I'm going to read you the first chapter just like I do with all of the other books, but first I want to give a quick shout out to Lindsay of Snazzy Cakes Bakery in Duluth because this is her real life wedding cake that she made and created. She has a bakery, so this isn't her wedding cake. It's one she made though, and she let me put it on the cover of this book, and it gives you a little hint as to what this story is going to be about. So thanks, Lindsay. Also, real quick, if you haven't read Champion Chocolatier or Champion Chocolatier Violetta Bites, go back and do that, because if you don't, then there will be spoilers in this book, and nobody likes a spoiler. So here's what this third book in the series is all about. 2 years ago, Emmy left her big city life in St. Paul to run Sweet Shore's chocolate store up north in Duluth, Minnesota. Soon after arriving, she fell for Eddie, a sweet distraction that made success at her new business venture a little more complicated. Last year, Emmy traveled to North Carolina to be on the EatTV Valentine's Day candy-making competition and came home with a prize even better than she could have imagined. Now in this third installment of the Champion Chocolatier series, we find Emmy scrambling to keep up with all the things she loves: Eddie, her sweet shop, and competitions. It's finally time for Emmy to get married, but surprisingly, her attention is diverted in several directions. While she's busy planning her wedding and running her successful business, she's also consumed with winning the Golden Honeymoon Giveaway. She and Eddie are so wrapped up in their separate goals that the contest seems like the perfect way to bring them together. Except that all of a sudden, Emmy's goals for winning may be the very thing that pushes her deepest desires away for good. So let's read chapter 1 and see what Emmy is up to this time. Champion Chocolatier, for better or worse. Real quick, here's the dedication. This book came out in spring of 2020. We all know what was happening then, but definitely what was not happening was a lot of weddings. And my heart just broke for all of those brides and grooms. So this book is dedicated to them. This book is dedicated to all the couples whose wedding plans have been postponed or derailed by the COVID-19 health crisis. I can't make the virus go away or your wedding day magically stay on track, but I can offer you a happy distraction for a few hours while you read this book. Wishing you and your wedding the best. July, Chapter 1. Most brides choose to get married in their hometown, but not Emmy. Sure, St. Paul was a lovely place, and before she moved to Duluth, St. Paul had been her only home. She had hundreds of happy childhood memories in that city, and her time at the U of M had been both fun and educational. But Emmy couldn't imagine her life without Sweet Shore's chocolate store or Eddie, neither of which existed in her mind before she moved to Duluth. She felt like her real life, the life she was meant to live, started the moment she left her city life and moved to the North Shore. Duluth was where her life was now, and that's where she wanted her life as a married couple to officially begin. Emmy's mother wasn't exactly pleased. She'd envisioned a lavish affair somewhere swanky in the Twin Cities, an event worthy of the page 6 in the Star Tribune. She'd tried to present her case several times, but Emmy stood firm, and eventually her mother gave up. However, what Mrs. Dawson lacked in enthusiasm was more than made up for by Mrs. Edwards. She was thrilled with the choice, and if possible, it endeared Emmy to her even more. One evening, after 3 glasses of wine, 2 more than her usual, Mrs. Edwards conspiratorially confessed to Emmy that she had feared Eddie might never get married. "He just loves that store so much," she had said. I didn't think he'd make time for anyone or anything else, let alone time to look for someone." Emmy nodded, listening intently. Apparently her mother wasn't the only overbearing one when it came to their children's relationships. Emmy let it go and reasoned Mrs. Edwards and her mother both had the best of intentions. She also figured they would get along splendidly, but worried that together they might become a dangerous duo of motherly suggestions. But then you came along and poof, it was just like magic. Or something like that. Emmy smiled and let her future mother-in-law keep her fairy tale version of Emmy and Eddie's early days. The Edwards had lived in Duluth all their lives, and consequently Mrs. Edwards seemed to know everyone and everything about them. She had been incredibly helpful as Emmy tackled wedding planning. Whenever Emmy inquired about a salon or a dress shop or a party favor vendor, a single call from Mrs. Edwards and it was, in her own words, just like magic. Emmy had a personal appointment with whomever she wanted. Between Mrs. Edwards' connections and Emmy's appearance on national TV, Emmy suddenly felt like Minnesota royalty. Wedding planning was a big job, but with Mrs. Edwards on board, it was a lot easier. Ever since getting engaged, Emmy had started joining Eddie at his childhood church. She read somewhere that only 26% of weddings these days took place in a church. Emmy briefly entertained joining the ranks of those who said their vows outside or in a hotel ballroom or at some other location. But after worshiping week after week in the pews of First Lutheran, it seemed like the best choice for their wedding ceremony. Even if Emmy could have had her pick of churches in town, and there were plenty, she's certain she would have chosen this one. She loved the tall, stained glass windows that stretched from floor to ceiling and cast the entire sanctuary in a warm glow. An impressive pipe organ nearly filled the entire wall, and there was singing, such beautiful singing. However, she could neither see nor hear any of those things now as she sat in the church basement. All those who wished to be married within its church's walls were required to attend 3 pre-marriage counseling sessions. The group sessions took place quarterly, and anyone getting married in the upcoming months gathered to be counseled, encouraged, advised. Emmy looked around the room at the other couples. Most of them seemed to be younger than her and Eddie, but she did notice one couple with graying hair holding hands sitting near the front. Good for them, she thought. She also noticed 2 men sitting side by side. At first she thought they were just waiting for their significant others, just like she was, but as the time ticked closer to the starting and their heads bent close to one another to chat again and again, she reasoned they were each other's significant other. Emmy smiled and felt even better about the choice to be married here, where all were welcome. Emmy glanced at her watch and then to the front of the room where the pastor sat, organizing her notes. Emmy's eyes cut to the door and then her watch again. The groom was a pretty necessary part of pre-marriage counseling, and right now, hers was missing. Just as Emmy was about to pick up her phone and text Eddie, he walked in. He moved confidently across the room, and Emmy felt herself relax. A smile spread across her face. He always had that effect on her. Eddie took a seat in the metal folding chair next to her and gave her a quick peck on the cheek. "Sorry I was almost late," he whispered in her ear. Emmy smiled. "The pastor hasn't started yet. How was your day?" The church bells chimed, signaling the top of the hour, and consequently cut Eddie off Eddie's reply. Now, the pastor did begin. As the final echoes of the bells faded away, the pastor stood and launched into what was probably a well-rehearsed presentation. "Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Pastor Kim, and I'd like to welcome you to First Lutheran Church and the first of your 3 pre-marriage counseling sessions. It's lovely to see both some familiar and new faces here. I hope that our time together proves valuable and also that you feel welcomed in this space. I know the term counseling comes with a whole bunch of burdensome connotations, but really you can just think of this as time with your soon-to-be spouse and an opportunity to talk about some important aspects of your soon-to-be joined lives, and some things that, without this dedicated time and prompting, might not otherwise come up." Emmy felt herself nodding and relaxing even further. Up until this moment, she hadn't realized she was nervous, but she was, or had been. Maybe it was the word counseling, or the group setting, or the potential judgment for waiting until she was 32 to get married. Either way, she felt that tension draining away as the pastor continued to speak. "Today we're going to start by discussing your goals as a couple. What hopes and dreams do you have for your lives together? There will be plenty of time to discuss the more difficult topics, and believe me when I say there will be challenging times in your marriage. But if you can ground your relationship in good intentions and common ground aspirations, I believe you'll be able to work through that tough stuff more easily." "Makes sense," Eddie said, when Pastor Kim dismissed them to discuss amongst themselves. "So, what do we want to accomplish? What do we want our lives together to look like?" Emmy folded her hands in her lap and looked upward, as if searching her brain space for a mural of visual options. It shouldn't be a hard question. It was probably even one of those questions with no wrong answer, but try as she might, Emmy couldn't think of a single thing that sounded good enough in her head to say out loud. After a solid minute of silent thinking, she realized Eddie was pretty quiet too. She let her eyes fall to his face. His eyebrows were squished together like 2 furry little caterpillars leaning toward one another for a kiss. Emmy giggled and Eddie shrugged. "It sounds awful," Emmy said, "but I can only think of goals for my store, Sweet Shores." Eddie let out a sigh of relief. "Would you hate me or love me more if I said I was having the exact same problem?" "I could never hate you," Emmy said. "Can I get that in writing?" Eddie asked. Emmy hit him playfully on his shoulder. It makes sense, Emmy pressed on. We've both been on our own for a long time. We don't have a lot of practice at this whole thinking for two thing. What if we say that one of our goals as a couple is to always support our spouse as they work toward achieving their personal goals? Isn't that cheating? Emmy asked with a laugh. It's our marriage, Eddie said. We get to make the rules. Plus, I love that you hustle to achieve your dreams and also that you support me while I work toward mine. Well, when you put it that way, it seems like we're both winning. Boom, Eddie said and pantomimed an explosion with his hands. We are totally rocking this marriage thing already. Emmy smiled. Okay, but I still think we should work on coming up with a couple's goal. Eddie stuck out his hand to shake. Deal. The rest of the counseling session passed quickly. Pastor Kim spent most of the time talking through the components of the wedding ceremony and sharing a packet of materials the church provided to each couple for selecting readings and hymns. By the time Emmy left, she felt great about every aspect of her upcoming marriage. She had found her soulmate, someone who shared her values and loved her completely, even her quirky parts. They had chosen a great church led by a wise and kind pastor who was giving them tools they needed to thrive together. It didn't matter that it took Emmy a little longer than she, or her mother, or Mrs. Edwards for that matter, would have liked. Right here, right now, Emmy was ready to start her happily ever after with Eddie. If you want to find out what happens in the rest of this book, I'd love for you to pick up a copy. I'll make sure that there's a link down in the description box. It's always available on Amazon or through my website, or if you see me out at an event. So thanks so much for checking out this series and my channel, and happy reading. Head to my website, WordNerdopolis, at amandazieba.com. Once you get there, click on the bookstore to see all the books I've written and the places where you can purchase them. Thanks so much for stopping by my channel, Learning with the Word Nerd. Please like this video and subscribe, and I'll see you again next time.